Hello and welcome to Student Affairs Live, the weekly web show for student affairs professionals in higher education. I am your host, Heather Shea Gasser from Michigan State University. Today I am talking with the contributors to the Lumina Foundation's recent publication, Beyond Financial Aid, which aims to help colleges strengthen the financial stability of low-income students and improve access and achievement on campus. Before we get on with the show, I need to recognize today's sponsors. Student Affairs Live is a part of the Higher Ed Live network, where free live webcasts allow viewers to share knowledge and participate in discussions around the most important issues in student affairs. You can tune in to Student Affairs Live with my amazing co-host Tony Duty and me this fall every other Wednesdays at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. Higher Ed Live is produced by M. Stoner, a marketing and communications firm that works with education institutions on branding, strategy, web design, and more. Join M. Stoner strategist Fran Zablocki for a three-part webinar series on higher ed information architecture. IA is critical to anyone who works to help their institution connect with visitors on the web. The better your site's IA, the easier it is for visitors to find information and engage with your institution. We're tweeting out a link now where you can learn more about this series and register. Student Affairs Live is also exclusively sponsored by ACPA, College Student Educators International. ACPA's strategic partnership with Higher Ed Live calls attention to the pairing of an innovative professional development delivery with the strength of a renowned professional association. Join ACPA President Gavin Henning at the 2015 Presidential Symposium live or virtually by clicking on the link that we're tweeting out now. Now on with today's show. Today's episode is part 2 of a 2-week series here on Student Affairs Live, focusing on fostering student success for low-income and first-generation college students. You can watch last week's episode by visiting the higheredlive.com website. As Dr. Kristen Wren, Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies and Professor at MSU, said this morning at our fall Student Success Kickoff, student success is everyone's job on campus. We need to work to get obstacles out of students' way so they can be successful. We want to increase graduation rates, decrease time to degree, and close opportunity gaps on our campuses. We have yet inequitable conditions on our campuses that disproportionately impact low-income and first-gen students. So what can campuses do? Lumina Foundation has recently released a new guidebook called Beyond Financial Aid, which, as I said, aims to equip campuses with information and strategies to close the attainment gap for low-income students. I'm thrilled today to be joined by Thomas Major, Corporate Counsel and Strategy Officer for the Lumina Foundation. Welcome, Thomas.
Good afternoon, Heather. Thank you.
Priya Chaplot, Higher Ed Consultant and co-author of the Guidebook. Welcome, Priya.
Hello.
And Rob Johnstone, Founder and President of the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement and co-author of Beyond Financial Aid. Thank you so much for being here, all of you.
Thank you.
All right, so Thomas, I want you to start by telling us a little bit about the genesis of this particular guidebook and how this connects with Lumina's larger initiatives. Many of us are familiar with Lumina's Goal 2025.
Yep, thank you. Glad to talk about that. As you know, Lumina Foundation is the largest private foundation in the country that is exclusively dedicated and devoted to increasing higher education attainment in the United States. And everything that we do revolves around what we're calling Goal 2025, which is increasing the rate of working age Americans ages 25 to 64 with a quality post-secondary credential to 60% by the year 2025. And so Beyond Financial Aid is an outreach of that particular goal, which really governs everything that Lumina does. And Beyond Financial Aid, or BFA as we lovingly refer to it, actually is part of an institutional mobilization strategy that we have among the various types of work that Lumina is doing. And so we've been working really over the better part of the last 18 months to 2 years to provide a resource to the field. This is BFA is something for institutions to use that hopefully will acknowledge the great work that is already being done in the field to support low-income students, while simultaneously making the case to continue to go further to progress this work. And so our hope and our goal is that the field will recognize and hopefully utilize Beyond Financial Aid as a resource, as a tool that makes the case for providing what might be considered non-traditional supports to low-income students, but while also providing some high-level information about how institutions would go about assessing their efficiency and effectiveness in providing these particular sorts of supports, but also then figuring out what their next steps might be if in fact they have the opportunity to go deeper or actually begin to establish these services for the first time. And so we're trying to do a number of different things with BFA, and we're excited about it. We're excited about what it is. The response from the field has really been tremendous. That's something we'll be talking about here shortly. But we're excited because BFA is something great right now, but as we continue to work through this beta phase with it to improve and revise it, we're even more excited about what it's going to be soon.
Excellent, very good. We are tweeting out a link to the website right now, so folks can download the document. It's a resource that is available for free on that website. And I also wanted to, I forgot to mention this, say that if folks who are watching today have questions for any of our panelists, Val Ruska is monitoring our back channel, and she'll make sure we get those so that we can discuss them live. So both of those resources are coming out to you all now. So Thomas, can you talk a little bit about the team of authors and how Lumina assembled not only Priya and Rob, but the other co-authors of this document to develop the guidebook?
Yeah, glad to. We were very excited to find and to work with Rob and Priya and the whole NCII team on BFA. Just by way of quick personal background, then actually I'm going to hand the microphone to Rob and Priya so that they might talk a little bit about the decades of experience that they're bringing to this work in higher education. In addition to providing legal support for all the foundation's operations by supporting our general counsel, my work at Lumina revolves around working with the institutional mobilization strategies that focus primarily on support for low-income students. And so we began the BFA process at Lumina, as I mentioned, a couple of years ago, as we began trying to figure out what are the things that we can use to help institutions become more aware about the issues impacting low-income students, and how we might assemble a resource that would be resonant and practical and helpful in terms of actually moving them from that awareness to action. And so really NCI's reputation, Rob, Priya's reputation sort of preceded them. And then when we started looking at who the perfect partners would be to begin to assemble a resource like this, our research and inquiries in the field led us to NCII. And so I think really, Rob, Priya, you all would be much better equipped than I to sort of talk about the decades of experience that you're bringing to this to make BFA something that is really of the field of higher education.
Thanks, Thomas. I think I'll go ahead and start here. And my name is Rob, and I'm happy to be on the call. Thanks for the opportunity to share this with you. We're really excited about it. Just real quickly, I personally started NCII about 2.5 years ago to continue the work on the national initiatives that I and Priya and others had been doing. The genesis of that work goes to the national side, goes back to projects like Completion by Design, projects like the Aspen Prize for Community College Excellence, which we work on quite closely with our friends over at the Aspen Institute, and a host of guided pathways projects across the country that Lumina funds, that Kresge funds, that Gates funds, in a host of states: Arkansas, Ohio, Michigan, Connecticut, New Jersey, North Carolina, Florida, Texas, Washington State, Hawaii. And so also, both Priya and I come from the California community college system, so we have an on-the-ground perspective as well. I was a dean of institutional research and also a vice president of instruction / provost at Foothill College in California and at Skyline College. So I've lived in the world of being on the ground of two-year colleges and have been exposed to four-year colleges through work on Lumina and other grants. And I'm struck by how at all but the highest flagship institutions, and even some of those, the problems we wrestle with in higher education in terms of needing to structure things differently for students and need to think about issues on the non-cognitive side of things like financial stability and social capital and hope and confidence and motivation. We've been working on all these issues for over a decade. And so while I come from instruction, I also very much work closely with student affairs professionals doing workshops around the country. My United balance is somewhere near 1 million miles because I spend my time just this week twice on campuses around the country working on either guided pathways or beyond financial aid or sharing what we've learned from the Aspen Prize. And so we were very honored to be asked to help with this project. We are very passionate about it. We are very excited to talk to you about not just this work, but I think what this work really represents is good work going on around the country at colleges. And one of the things we're most interested in is hearing more from you about things you're doing at your college. So that's a quick background. We are from the field, and we are also in this team of national assistance partners. It's a pretty small field who are working with colleges around the country and great foundations like Lumina to help make this a better environment for our students. And we fundamentally believe, we have a passionate belief, that if we do the things that we're talking about here in BFA combined with some other things, that transformationally higher number of students will be getting degrees and certificates of high quality that prepare them from the workplace and to have a living wage. So we're very passionate about the work. Priya?
And that's great, Rob. Thanks so much. I certainly share the kind of enthusiasm and perspective that Rob has. The other piece I want to mention is that over the last few years, we've been doing a lot more work trying to better understand the holistic experience of students. So a few years ago, when I was working at the community college as an institutional researcher, a lot of my work was around student learning outcomes, institutional learning outcomes, general education outcomes, which were trying to connect different classroom experiences together. That was saying, what a student learns in one class also has to be connected to a broader programmatic experience or an educational experience. Then Rob and I also worked in the RP group, the Research and Planning Group in California, on a project called Student Support Redefined, which was saying, yes, what's happening inside the classroom is important, but what other types of supports outside the classroom on campus are also important. And then now Beyond Financial is taking that, I think, to another level. That's saying, outside of the institution, which types of reality experiences that students are facing impact their ability to be successful in school. And that's, I think, where Beyond Financially is coming in, is to say, what are students experiencing inside and outside the institution, and what is the institution's responsibility in the context of student success. So that's why I'm really excited. Plus, when I was in college, I was also a low-income student, and so this is a very personal experience for me as well, to be able to support students that are the first in their families to go to school, or that are balancing many, many different obligations while they're trying to better their lives academically, professionally. So this is a personal and professional project for us.
Great. Thank you so much, Priya. I really appreciate. And I think that what's really important for folks who are watching today in Student Affairs is that this is the work that we do, and it's linking all of those pieces together. Priya, can you talk a little bit about the anatomy of the document itself? What's contained within it, and specifically what, if you were to access it right now, you might find and then could put to work right away?
Absolutely. So Beyond Financial Aid, at its anchor, is a guidebook, and you can download the entire 47-page document on the website, luminafoundation.org/BFA. The 47 pages actually have 4 parts. The first 2 parts are braided together, and the last 2 parts are also combined together. So the first part is a primer that makes the case for supporting low-income students, and specifically around strengthening student stability, the financial stability that allows them to focus on their academic work and their educational goals. So the first part is a primer that makes the case. It gives some characteristics about who low-income students are, what kinds of socioeconomic and academic impacts they face or they engage with, and also provides some information about the benefits of supporting students in this way, what kind of benefits are available to the student, to the institution, and to society as a whole. So it kind of creates this foundational context. The second part is a framework of 6 strategies, which Rob and I will go into detail in just a few minutes. And the 6 strategies identify activities that the colleges can engage in because of what we've also learned from successful colleges that have engaged in these. And in many cases, many colleges are already doing parts of these efforts in different ways. So this is just a framework about ways to approach financial stability and thinking about it as a whole. The third part is actually where we translate from this broad, national, regional understanding to a really institutional understanding. And so part 3 is probably the heart, the centerpiece of Beyond Financial Aid, and that's an institutional self-assessment. This is a self-assessment that has 6 parts. Each part corresponds to each of the 6 strategies from the part before, and just has items that the college can do, almost like a self-assessment inventory of what we have on campus, what may be some good ideas to consider if we don't have. So it's not meant to be this identifying of deficiencies, but it's more of an inventory of what's available. And then part 4 is an interpretation guide that takes a look at how you responded as a college in part 3 and helps you as a team figure out what are some discussion points, activities that might be good to continue forward. So that's the heart of Beyond Financial Aid, or the four parts. On the website, we also have other types of modularized resources to make it easier, because 47 pages is a lot to handle. So we have an executive summary, which is 3 pages, a 2-pager, which is 2 pages, which is kind of an easy document to pass around to colleagues just to help them get a sense of what Beyond Financial Aid could be. We also have an FAQ section that has frequently asked questions that we've received from colleges that we've put on this website because we feel that others might also be asking similar questions. We have past recordings of webinars that we've done, PowerPoint presentations, and we're also developing a stories from the field section where we're sharing the college stories. We have many included in BFA, but also others that we're gathering as we continue this year of learning about BFA. So all those are available on the website, plus upcoming learning opportunities, etc. You can sign up. I mean, there's just a great amount of information that's there.
And we understand, by the way, that people are going to access and interact with this information on a variety of levels, right? And that's just part of how this is designed. Is the BFA can be a really useful tool for a college to take a really deep dive into the issue of financial stability and to really explore it and to maybe think about some things that haven't been considered before and to build on the good work colleges are already doing. But we also think in the short term there are other usage scenarios where the colleges can kind of take a look at the quick ideas or the general set of strategies and kind of integrate them in various ways into the things they're doing on campus. So we're interested in hearing back on both because we want to design resources that fit the bill, and we've tried to take a first stab at that with a variety of options Priya has described.
Can one of you talk about the response so far? What feedback have you received? Do you know about how folks are using it and implementing it on their campuses?
Yeah, I mean, a quick answer here is that we've had a chance. So we launched this over the summer, and we've started to get some of the web and online feedback, but we've also had a chance to be in front of people in a variety of settings, in professional development settings where we have multiple colleges in a room. We've also had a chance to do a couple where we have a more focused sessions. And what's fascinating to me about this is I've done a couple of these, Priya's done a couple of these, Thomas has been there as well, is how passionate people get about this. I mean, this really strikes at the heart of why most of us work in the community colleges. And the core proposition here that we actually can change the structures, the conditions, and the approaches so that more students have the financial stability they need to go complete, as we were talking about earlier, is really striking to a lot of people. And as Priya said earlier, and I also was a full Pell Grant student, a lot of people in these rooms see themselves in the students that we're trying to serve. And so I think it's an energizing message that we can't, not just we, the authors and Lumina, can say there's more to do here, but the reality is that the colleges have done some things that we really want to share. And so as you start sharing those stories of other colleges, people see their college being able to kind of to interact with these ideas. And Priya and I, and Thomas, Priya and I especially from being on the ground, we understand how hard this is to translate these ideas from passion and theory into action. Organizational change is a tough thing. I'm a social psychologist. But we also, when we see that passion, we get excited about potentially being able to help catalyze it further through our efforts and through Lumina's efforts and the great kind of opportunity we have that Lumina has given us all over the next year to learn from the field where this resonates, where it maybe needs other support, and really to get more and more of these stories. So I think the response, because of people's passions about, especially in student affairs, right? Obviously, I think faculty and administrators in general are passionate about working in community college, but the student affairs professionals, they really see this. It's their day-to-day work. They live it. They're on the ground with these students. They know that $500 can mean a lot to some of our students. It's an equally big barrier as $10,000 is to someone else. So they see the reality of this, I think. So the passion comes through pretty strongly.
And I think what's also important to see here is that many people have felt this, as Rob mentioned, for a long time. And I think what's happening in higher education right now, thinking more holistically about success versus access, is bringing to light these issues of what our students face when they're coming to school. So in many of the sessions that we've done, people just say, this is stuff I have felt so strongly about for a long time, but I always thought that it was just in a department on campus. And I think part of this is the conversation that's talking about a more institutional effort to support students in a more holistic way, which I think we'll talk a little bit more about. That many in student affairs have been doing this forever. So this is really saying, what is the shared institutional responsibility? Where can we expand and scale this so that this becomes a normal support system for students more broadly?
Yeah, and just to add to that, Priya, I think the expand and scale is a really big part of what Lumina's strategic priorities are all about. We are very interested in doing exactly that, which is finding ways to help these these supports and these services transcend a single department on a campus, to be part of an overall institutional conversation about increasing student attainment. And we've had just from the tracking and interfacing with the field that we've been doing from this end, literally hundreds of institutions have asked to remain abreast about what BFA's developments are, the opportunity to engage with us in that way, to make sure that we have updates and continuing conversation is also available through the Lumina Foundation website, luminafoundation.org/BFA. There's an opportunity on the page to request updates and information on BFA, whether it's training opportunities, presentations, or other sorts of things. We've had literally hundreds of campuses line up to stay abreast of what the developments are. We've also had a great response from those not necessarily in higher education, but those who impact the opportunity to provide these services or to augment some of the policy supports that might be available to help them to happen. And so I think the ultimate goal here from a response, the ultimate response that we've been getting so far, the initial response has been extremely positive as folks figure out that there are things that not only that are possible, but that are already being done. And I think any chance you get to sort of pay homage to the great work that's already being done in the field, it makes it that much more concrete and doable for the eyes of those who have this passion that we're talking about today.
Yeah. I think when I was reviewing the document, what really struck me was that this guidebook is meant to meet institutions kind of where they're at, and give them multiple paths to improvement. And those 6 strategies, which I'd love to go into in more detail now, are designed with that in mind. So Priya, can you talk a little bit about how these 6 strategies work together to increase supports of low-income students, and give us a review for folks who haven't read the whole document? Oh, you're on mute still, sorry.
Thank you. So I'm happy to give a brief overview of the 6 strategies. They're each explored in great detail in the full document, and they also have their respective items in the self-assessment. So there's definitely more than what I'm going to share right now. Just some brief morsels to get you a sense of what the 6 strategies are. Now, all the 6 strategies are not in any particular order. They're not ordered 1 through 6, but I will say that the first one, we talked a lot about this, the first one is probably one that we want colleges to think about first, and then the others can be rearranged based on institutional priorities. So the first strategy is to know the low-income students at your institution. Each institution has a unique mix of resources, cultural values, students, and faculty, staff, administrators. So recognizing that, the first thing to do is for an institution to review quantitative and qualitative data that helps them better understand who their low-income students are, etc. The first thing is probably also to have a working definition. We've seen colleges use definition that all of our low-income students are those who receive Pell or who might be Pell eligible. There are others like the Pell Institute externally that have a definition based on household income, and also do it based on household income and household size. So it really varies, but the one that we've seen many colleges use is just Pell eligibility or Pell recipiency. Keeping that in mind, using quantitative and qualitative data can help better understand, A, how many students on your campus are low-income students, using whatever definition you have. What kinds of progress and success rates do these students have? You're looking at what is their amount of unmet financial need, and this is a really big one, because this one is talking about the difference between what traditional financial aid like grants and loans will cover versus what else is left for the student to address. So what are the levels of unmet financial need? What types of programs do low-income students take advantage of? What types of services do they engage in? So these are some questions that can help better understand what is the proportion of students on campus that are low-income students. You can even compare this with first-generation students where there's a little bit of overlap, and we can certainly talk about that later. But the first piece is just to get a sense of what is the reality at our institution. Rob, do you have any, and feel free, Rob, to jump in for any of these strategies. I'm just going to kind of work through them.
No, keep going, Priya. You're doing great.
The second strategy is to help students overcome practical barriers. Now, this is where the beyond and beyond financial aid is coming, and this is coming back to the unmet financial need. So what do we mean when we say beyond? It's the kinds of expenses that students face that aren't necessarily covered by traditional financial aid, or that don't include just tuition and fees. So these include reliable, adequate access to housing, nutrition, childcare, transportation. You're talking about legal services, tax services, financial services, basically all the cost of life, cost of living expenses that students have to address sometimes as they go through school part-time or full-time, and they also work part-time or full-time. And so part of strategy 2 is to provide spaces where students can access these services, and we really encourage that these services be accessible in a way that is centralized for the student, that's integrated for the student, and that's bundled for the student. And what that basically means in different ways is, if I'm a student and I'm coming in to, let's say, get a sense of what kind of financial aid is available. For example, it might be an opportunity where I also engage in a public benefits screening that could say, hey, Priya, you're also eligible for this and that. Or if I'm a student that's coming in to use a particular service on campus, at that time I also learn about other services that might be useful to me as well. And so as much as possible, we're trying to ease the access that students have to as many different types of services as possible, so that students don't have to go either to different places on campus or off campus, where we cross our fingers and hope that they were able to get the services that they need. So that's where the second one is coming in. And for each of these strategies, we have examples in Beyond Financial Aid, the Guidebook. So there are examples of different colleges that are doing this as well. Skyline College in California, for example, has Spark Point, which is a central space for students to come and get support. Central New Mexico has something called CNM Connect, which is another space where this is working. The third strategy is about
just real quickly, I want to pop in on the second strategy. Yep. I think this is where we also should pay homage to some of the work that's come before us. Yep. By some of the national projects such as Single Stop, the Working Family Success Network, Benefits Access for College Completion, which, I mean, you go back 5 years, there wasn't a lot of national kind of focused, intentional work being done. There's a lot of stuff going on at colleges. I mean, student affairs professionals have been doing pieces of this for years. But I think in the last 5 years, I find it an interesting parallel to the Guided Pathways movement, where we've started to see the kind of national discourse and foundation-led initiatives kind of move in this direction. And so the folks at Working Family Success Network, Benefits Access for College Completion, and Single Stop have all, in each of their own ways, worked to provide a different version of these services in more packaged ways. And so I think it's useful. It's not the only way to do this, right? And they each, I mean, some of them are foundation initiatives that have limited people in it. Single Stop is a great organization that also has a limited number of people that they can serve. And so I think part of the message here is also that you don't need one of these big national initiatives to take this on. And so we can learn from them. I think there's a lot to learn from what WFSN and BACC and Single Stop have done. And it also is possible to integrate that learning kind of with a tool, like a catalyst tool like Beyond Financial Aid, and your own on-the-ground expertise, to really think broadly and holistically about what are the types of supports we can provide services. And again, it's really critical that, remember, we're providing these supports so they can meet their goals of hitting their educational, the completion and moving to the workforce, and we can hit our goals on the accountability side and also on the moral and ethical side of providing the best conditions so that students can rise to the occasion and move through academically.
Thanks for mentioning that, because the other part of this is also, I think what Beyond Financial Aid we're trying to do with this is to also highlight where there are already institutional practices that are worth scaling up. So TRIO programs, other work that Student Affairs is doing, other programs on campus that have shined a light on what might be scalable for all students. I mean, you might have a lot of resources already on your campus that you can also consider finding ways to be able to integrate or to be able to leverage and scale them up as well. So absolutely, looking at external practices like Rob is talking about, we mentioned many of these in BFA, the Guidebook, but also looking at institutionally what might be happening that could be used as well.
Great.
Great. Oh yeah, go ahead, Heather.
You still have more strategies to go, I think, right?
I do. We're on strategy 3. Yes. So strategy 3 is to leverage external partnerships. So talking about the types of services that students may need when we think about unmet financial need, the strategy 3 is saying You don't have to do it all on your own. You don't have to fund it all on your own. In some cases, there are partners in your community, some that you may already be having relationships with as an institution that might have similar missions, similar values, and more importantly, share similar target populations as your students. So finding ways to be able to engage community partners. Now, these could be workforce and government benefits agencies, community-based organizations, faith-based organizations, corporate partners, anybody who is doing different types of work that you could leverage and have them come on campus. Now, the last part is probably really, really important, to be able to say we're going to create or strengthen existing partnerships, but finding ways to be able to bring them back to the student. As we mentioned in the last strategy, as much as possible, making this as easily accessible to students as possible. So there are examples where Georgia State University partnered with a bank that was local in Atlanta, that had a commitment to the community already. They came on campus to provide financial literacy and financial coaching support to students directly. Or Skyline College that actually had supplemental nutrition applications available on campus in one day, where students were able to apply and get approved on campus all in the course of one day. So finding ways to be able to leverage partnerships and then bring them on campus. One other important thing to mention here is partnerships are not easy, but they do have a potential for a strong return. So they do require some work up front, establishing the partnership, kind of nurturing and keeping an ongoing, consistent relationship between people at the organization, people on campus. But what we've seen and what we've heard from colleges is this is something that can really help broaden the community perspective on how to support students that are there as well. Rob, any additional thoughts before we move to 4? Okay, so number 4 is, now we've talked a lot about what the institution can do, what the community can do. Strategy 4 is saying, what can we do to empower students to use existing resources? So instead of creating new resources or new partnerships, what is already available on campus that might be underused by students? What are things that we could do better outreach, do stronger engagement? How can we help students build the capacity to initiate asking for help? How can we strengthen those help-seeking behaviors so that students are able to request that kind of support? And one big piece of strategy 4 is how can we normalize some of these activities so that students don't feel like they are being singled out, but that this is a natural way that a successful student proceeds. When a student goes in to find their available support to be able to come to school, in addition to traditional financial support, they also find out about the non-traditional financial support that can also help them. How can we institute opt-out policies versus opt-in policies? Because in many cases, the students who need the support the most, students like low-income students, first-generation students who may not have the familiarity to navigate the complex maneuverings in higher education, they need them more than ever, and sometimes they're the ones that are the least likely to ask. So if there are ways that we can use opt-out strategies where all the students receive a particular service, but they have to say, no, actually, I don't want it for whatever reason. So thinking about ways to normalize the process, to make this the standard way that students get support, monitoring their progress, letting them monitor their progress, letting that be a natural way for students to see their kind of work towards their educational goal. So strategy 4 is really about how can you empower students to use what already exists. And the other piece to mention that I wanted to chime in again, Heather, was what was in last week's piece about engaging current students. How can current students serve as an ally in working in this work, because they've also lived through these experiences, juggling all these different responsibilities, and how can they help new students kind of make sense of what's happening as well.
I love just a quick 2-sentence snippet here. Story on strategy 4. It was one of the colleges we met in Pennsylvania, Montgomery College, did this amazing thing to make the process of using the food pantry more mainstream and not having a stigma to it. They actually had their bookstore hand out bookstore bags. So they gave the bookstore bags to the food pantry, so when the food pantry handed out food, it was in bookstore bags. So students wouldn't feel the stigma of carrying around food pantry bags around the campus. I mean, it's simple little things like that that are just quietly brilliant to take. I mean, this is what we want to hear more of. We want to hear more stories like this, so we're encouraging you throughout, you and your peers, to share where you've heard other things so we can share it with the field so we can all benefit, because it's just such a simple idea that really hits at a major issue, which is this issue of stigmatizing and using the services.
Yeah. And Heather, you'd asked earlier what we had learned from the sessions that we've done. I mean, these are really bilateral learning experiences for us. So as Rob was saying, we will share what we've heard other colleges do, and then colleges in the room will say, oh, well, this is what we're doing. So it's really, really just heartening to be able to see how much there is happening. And I think what we're trying to emphasize is how can you make it easier for the student to access, how can you make it easier for the student to access multiple at the same time. Strategy 5 is about reviewing your internal processes as an institution. So this one is really talking about, maybe it isn't so much about creating new services, maybe it's sometimes our own practices as an institution, our own principles, and our own philosophy, our own kind of processes and practices that get in the way of our own students. So what might have been convenient at one time, there was an example that Georgia State had given about the requirements to enter their nursing program, and it was a 2-year pre-nursing program that students had to enroll in, and many students enrolled, but a very small fraction of those students actually got in. So for the 2 years of classes that those students took, it was fine. But for the 80 to 90% of the students that didn't make it into the nursing program, they had spent 2 years working towards a program they weren't getting into, using financial aid that they didn't have for the new program that they had to adjust to. So recognizing this, Georgia State actually changed its practice. They reduced their pre-nursing program to 1 year. They removed any core courses from that so that students who weren't going to get into the program weren't taking classes that they didn't need. And the third thing they did was also do proactive advising. So if they noticed that a student wasn't making the progress that would make them eligible or competitive in getting into the nursing program, they actually advised them on other types of health careers or other options to be able to get in. So just one example of how our own internal practices can get in the way of our students.
Yeah, and, by the way, I
yeah.
have a whole 2-hour rant on the pre-nursing conundrum, so we can do that another time. It's a huge problem on, yeah, well, I won't get into it because it will not take less than 2 hours. So.
Yes. Yeah. No, each of these I think have an incredible amount of conversation in it, and I think the pre-nursing is only one example. There was another college I was talking to who said that they did an internal review of how the student interacts with the campus, and they charted out all the different interactions, and they found out the student was getting bombarded with messages in the early part when the student first started, and then there were long absences of any kind of student interaction, so they were using that as a way to kind of manage the flow of communication to the student by looking at how different departments were looking for it. An example that, oh yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and the other piece to that is that how do students know which of those messages they should pay attention to, or in what order they should be responding? And we were talking about this exact issue this morning when students are receiving 50 or so emails and they all say from somebody at MSU. How do you know what's most important?
Right, absolutely. So part of this is like, how can we think more holistically about the institutional experience a student has, all the different parts that we're part of, but also all the different parts that they're engaging with that are just with colleagues of ours. And so Skyline College, this is an example we provide in the guidebook, actually has a comprehensive diversity framework, which they basically do an internal audit with an equity lens. I know that's a mouthful, but they basically they flow chart the students' experiences, and they say, how do different students experience this differently? A very quick story because I think it's great. It's simple, but it's profound. Is Skyline College had online registration, and so when they enabled online registration, let's say the online registration is tomorrow, students who have access to a computer and access to the internet can start registering for classes tonight at 12:01. Students who don't have access to these resources will have to wait till the office opens on the campus tomorrow morning, creating an 8-hour lag, 8.5-hour lag between students who have a particular resource and students who don't. And so what they wanted to do, they said this was an equity issue, and they actually changed it so that everybody had access. So I think registration, both online and in person, started at the same time to be able to make it equitable for students. So this is just a small example of how looking at our internal processes may reveal inequities that we actually have a lot more control over than we may think. And lastly, we're almost there, strategy 6 is really about the fact that BFA does not exist in a bubble. Financial stability for students doesn't exist in a bubble. And strategy 6 is saying this work has to be implemented alongside other effective practices that the institution is engaging in to be able to ensure academic progress for all students. And specifically, so these are practices that are guided pathways, helping students monitor and track their own progress, looking at how to help students choose a program of study and help them make sure that's the right fit for them, and if they need to change, what are the options for them to be able to change. So these are all effective practices that affect the student's ability to maneuver and move through school, and we're saying that financial aid is in tandem with these other practices. And in the end, students that are low income, students that are first generation, many of these students would especially benefit from these services because they might be newer to the system than other students that may have other types of resources coming in as well. So Strategy 6 is really saying there's a broader umbrella of institutional efforts that beyond financial aid can fit into.
Yeah.
Now, Heather, I know we need to move on, but there's one thing I just wanted to say really quickly. Hopefully, over the course of hearing those 6 strategies, sort of some themes emerge, because Lumina's goal and our hope and our perspective here is that institutions will be able to use BFA. I think Rob described it as a catalyst tool. It's the opportunity to begin hopefully a series of ongoing campus-wide conversations about sort of what we refer to as the 3 Ps: policies, practices, and partnerships, to begin to get a feel from within about what exactly is happening and how students are experiencing it. Giving institutions the opportunity to begin a conversation that says, okay, we understand that we're doing these things or maybe not doing these things, but with the things that we're doing, let's take a look at what we're doing, not only what we're doing, but why we're doing it, how we're doing it, and how well it's working, so that there's an opportunity there to figure out whether or not there are some things that might be changed or might be expanded. And so the hope is, at least from an institutional mobilization standpoint, moving from awareness to action, what this creates is the opportunity to have a focused conversation about a lot of broad-reaching issues that may have some great solutions behind it. So hopefully that was sort of evident. The common denominators across those 6 strategies were evident as Priya was describing them.
Yeah, that is actually that's a perfect segue into my next comment and question, because that's what I was picking up on, is that there are some things that we might, in student affairs or elsewhere on campus or in partnership with other offices on campus, think about doing differently as a result of reviewing these strategies. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I noted when I was reading through the guidebook is on Strategy 2, you talk about resources and assistance that campuses are providing to students, or that they should be providing to students. Many of these resources are provided in student affairs or in tandem with other offices. But you mentioned that these resources can be more effective if they're bundled, integrated, and centralized. And on large campuses like Michigan State, where I'm at, and other campuses, really large systems or community college systems, we need to talk about structural and organizational change in order to employ that type of integrated system. How can we start making that case as in student affairs or wherever we sit in the organization to decision makers to possibly look at restructure?
Anyone want this? Because I'll take a shot at it.
You can. Why don't you start?
All right.
I'll chime in. Go ahead.
This is tricky stuff, right? I mean, I worked before I came to higher ed in industry as a strategic consultant, and this is the nature of organizational psychology, is that there is a tendency to look inward and below where your organizational scope sits. And so it is, I mean, Heather, I love the way you say it. It's incumbent on leadership to be the one who either structurally helps reduce that tension, not tension existing between organizations, but just because of the structural tension, and to create cross-functional teams. I think the best way that we've seen this happen on, whether it's the emergent work here in financial stability, a lot of the work in guided pathways, which Priya and I have a long history with, and folks like Public Agenda, an organization out of New York who does a lot on practitioner engagement and the idea of you need practitioners to work together across functional cross-functional structural lines to solve these complex problems. And so it is absolutely something that we almost have to be maniacally paying aware to, because it's not as if the people on this webinar or the recipients of Beyond Financial Aid don't already have full jobs and day jobs and a lot of work going on that has a lot of moving pieces. I mean, educational institutions, higher ed is a very complex set of endeavors and the interaction between a cultural history that is essentially a model that hasn't changed in 600 years and modern organizational psychology is a tense one at times. And so I think the answer to it is in looking to where you can leverage already existing cross-functional teams, and if an organization doesn't have them, I think this is one. I mean, I'm not going to send them to the Covey School of Management or anything, but I think the idea of cross-functional teams working on things is pretty important. And we've seen when we're asked who should be in the room to interact with BFA, we look for an interaction between not only various organizations within student services and various units, but senior leadership, faculty leaders, department chairs, because it has to be a holistic approach to get through this. Now, having said that, we are also very aware that some of these structures don't exist, and there are internal campus politics, and there are power struggles. And Priya and I were just last week in an unnamed large community college that has a lot of internal politics, and it's nothing that they're doing wrong. They serve 50,000 students, right? So it's just the nature of that kind of organizational psychology that we have to make sure that leadership understands the need to work cross-functionally. And what I always go back to them when I'm in a room with is I say, look, at the end of the day, if you're happy with where you are, and the results you're seeing from your students and you're fine with it, don't change anything. But I think for many regional four-year schools and most all community colleges, we're not happy with those results overall. We know they could be better. And so it takes this type of effort to work between those historical barriers.
Great. I just looking at our time, I know we could probably go on and talk about this kind of dilemma about whose responsibility student success is for quite a long time. I think one of the challenges is who we define as low-income students, and we had a question come through on Twitter from Paul Eaton who asked about that. Is it problematic to only define it as Pell eligible? And what about those students, we talked about this last week, what about those students who don't apply for financial aid, undocumented students, and other students? How do we help those students find the strategies, or is it the campus's responsibility to remove the obstacles for them to be successful? Rob, do you want to, or Priya, either one?
Yeah, I mean, the quick answer, I mean, I'll give it to Priya, I think, is Pell eligibility is a proxy for low-income status, right? And we were in the same conversation last week with this college that has a very wide range of different communities within their service area, and low income means something in one community, and that same income level would be different in another community, and that level of nuance doesn't often exist in Pell, right? So we have a lot of people that are in I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I mean, Pell only goes to a certain income level. It's not really adjusted for the fact that it costs twice as much to have an apartment here. And so those factors play out on campuses. Another thing in California, if you were in a state that has tuition waivers at the state level, you may not have as many students applying for Pell. There's also cultural differences, and we have to call these out, in the types of students that tend to apply for financial aid versus avoid it. And it's not anything right or wrong, it's just a cultural difference. So yeah, absolutely right that Pell is a proxy. It doesn't deal with tax status issues. It doesn't deal with head of household issues, whether the student is on the parents. I mean, we have all kinds of issues there that we know are problematic. So I think it's up to the college to think of more useful, more kind of intentional ways to try to figure out what low income means on their status, and whether students view themselves as low income is another lens into this as well.
Yeah, and I would just kind of add to that too, Rob. You know, there are also opportunities to sort of make services available to everyone, so that students have the opportunity to affirmatively opt out of them. So that way everybody's covered and everybody's engaged, as opposed to saying that, you know, outreach will be targeted in a particular direction or to particular folks. Simply saying this is how we do business, this is how we operate, and if you don't need it, you can affirmatively tell us you don't need it. But we're not going to assume, nor hopefully we're not given the impression that we would only be giving outreach to certain batches or groups of students, because the person who asked the question is spot on with that. You know, targeting based on, you know, Pell eligibility, as Rob was just saying, that, you know, that's a proxy. Hopefully the idea will be that this is something that is just available, and the students themselves will feel empowered and appropriately informed to take advantage of what they need.
Priya, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, the only piece I wanted to mention was that Pell eligibility, like Rob said, is a proxy, and I think if anything that's just an anchor to help communicate, because part of what BFA is really talking about is educating and empowering students, but also educating and empowering others on campus. There is a framework of what our expectations of students are. And I think part of this is to say, when we talk about low-income students, this is a substantial population. And in many cases, especially at community colleges, it is a majority of the students that are there. According to the College Board, they say 2 in 5 students are Pell eligible, and coming back to the person from Twitter, this is undercounting the true number of students. So recognizing that this is a substantial number of students, and that if we can help them in a way that is in the context of student success, we might not only help them individually, but also as an institution help reach institutional as well.
Great. On last week's episode, we spent a fair amount of time talking about an anti-deficit approach, and I think this relates to this topic of definition as well. As we've said many times, deficit-based perspectives limit our belief in the potential of low-income students to achieve success. So can you talk a little bit about what strengths low-income students bring to campus, and what are the benefits of having, and employing the strategies that Beyond Financial Aid is suggesting? Thomas, you want to start with that, and then we'll...
Yeah, the fascinating question. I would be glad to. And I mean, I guess the strengths that low-income students bring are themselves. I mean, the income status is that's a circumstance. It's a descriptive characteristic that defines sort of a socioeconomic situation. And I'm not discounting it by any means, but it has nothing to do with the value of the human capital that every one of these students represent. I mean, part of the reason that Goal 2025 exists is because we understand Lumina Foundation has embraced and is really behind providing the opportunity to maximize the amount of human capital that is brought to bear in the United States. And so the value that low-income students bring is themselves. I mean, they're students. It's part of what we have in the Beyond Financial Aid Guidebook is an illustration that shows, the fact that really, really well-qualified low-income students due largely to issues around finances have a much tougher time completing, in contrast to much lower qualified or much lower qualified, they're more lower qualified but more higher resourced peers in completing. And so what we have there is a situation where students with more resources but maybe not quite as high performing complete at much higher rates than well qualified but under-resourced students, which show that the what we call this achievement gap may actually be more of a gap in resources. And so the benefits the low-income students bring are themselves. I think what we have here is a situation where there is an understanding that hopefully BFA will bring about, that there is a reciprocal accountability on behalf of the students, but also on behalf of the institutions. Institutions offer degree granting programs for a reason. Students enroll in those programs for a reason. Both of those reasons are the same, which is to complete and to earn that degree. And so the question becomes, though, there are reciprocal responsibilities as well. And the benefits that those students bring are the opportunity to have diversity of experience, all of the economic benefits, which Lumina talks about a lot, and a number of the variety of studies and reports that we release that show from a personal standpoint, from a community standpoint, certainly from a national and international standpoint, making certain that resources are not the sole reason or a primary reason that a student is forced to stop out or drop out of school is a national imperative that we have to fix. And so the benefits are limitless. I could go on. That would be my 2-hour rant in talking about the benefits and value of this population to American society.
Yeah.
I mean, we can be more operational about it. It's also the benefit to the college. If you're going to leverage, if you're going to improve your graduation rate, it's not going to happen by funding more high-income students, right? There aren't that many of them, and they tend to be distributed across the organization. But there's a significant opportunity for well-qualified low-income students to complete if the conditions are changed. And I think the story of Georgia State, I mean, you got to call out what's happened at Georgia State on a number of fronts. They've done guided pathways, but they've also paid significant attention to financial stability. They've improved their graduation rate by 25 points, from near 30% to 55% over a 10-year period, where their SAT score stayed the same, where their average number of African-American students went from 40% to 60%, and their actual unmet financial need, which they measure, has gone up. And yet in that time, with their approaches, they've done this transformational thing. This is not about numbers. That's 26 points out of 100. But if they have 20,000 students a year, you're talking about 5,000 more students graduating. I mean, these are not numbers, they're people. And that's every year. So I could not support what Thomas said more. And to do this hard work, to get leadership to buy into this, you have to believe it's possible. And I think Georgia State and a couple other stories we have around the country have told us that it is. Florida State, Arizona State as well, in the 4-year, Valencia, City College of Chicago in the 2-year space. You got to believe it's possible.
So, Thomas, what is next? I wanted to know kind of how, as you said, this is a working document, obviously taking in lots of feedback from institutions. What's next for Lumina, and how can institutions who are watching today stay up to date with the progress that's being made with Beyond Financial Aid?
I would say, the biggest part about what's next is that I would like to say that the microphone is open. And so the hope is that institutions all that are hearing this webcast all across the country will hop on to luminafoundation.org/BFA, read the document, download the document, let us know that you're online. Register for updates. If you have stories about your institution that you want to share, all the practices that Rob and Priya were talking about, and trying to find out, we want to deepen the experience base, the resource base that we can provide to let institutions know about things like, the book bag food pantry protocol and all these other different sorts of things. We know this work is being done out there. We also know the student affairs professionals have a large role in helping to make sure these things happen every day. What we are asking during this beta period, during this learning period, as we expose BFA to the field, our goal and our desire is to make people aware that it is there, and then to hear back from the field with feedback about what they think about it, what resonates, what might need tweaking, what some of their stories and experiences are, because we're in an active process to revise this and to provide more support to the field in terms of specific strategies they can use to implement it. There's an opportunity. We're going to be having a webinar coming up on October the 8th. By the end of the week, there will be an opportunity to register for that particular event. If you just go in, log in, register for updates, you'll have an invitation for that and all the other things that are coming. But our desire is find out about it, take it to your colleagues, take it within your institution, kick the tires, and let us know what your experience with it is.
When we talk about using a strengths-based approach, it's the same for institutions as it is for students. That with students, they bring such a diverse sense of reality and experience to the institution, and to this project for us, every time we share with an institution, we end up learning a lot more. So we really encourage, like Thomas said, for this opportunity to learn from you and find out what creative, innovative things that you're doing that you would be interested in sharing with us, so that we can only send it across to other colleges that might be finding ways to do it as well.
This is great. Thank you, all three of you, for being on here on the show today. And I want to give an opportunity at the end. We had to skip through a couple of questions. If there's something that I didn't ask that you'd like to talk specifically about, or any points, final thoughts on increasing access and support to low-income students that you'd like to share. Priya, I'll start with you, and then we'll conclude today's show.
I think the biggest thing to share is that Beyond Financial Aid is only an instrument. It's a support tool that you can use to organize the way that your institution already supports students, and find ways to expand that support, to enrich that support, to normalize this for all students across the institution. And the fact that you're not alone, that many colleges are doing this, you're already doing this, just to find ways to scale some really, really great work that's already happening inside and outside. So it's really just a sense of possibility and aspiring to what's possible.
Great. Thanks so much for being here, Priya. I appreciate it. Rob.
Yeah, I think what I said earlier, that the passion and energy that we share for this is it's not only because we're passionate about changing the conditions for these students, is that we believe that it's not only possible that we can do this. This is something we've started to see. I get really passionate about the combination of this work and the Guided Pathways work to really create conditions like that have moved the field and moved the needle for our students. And so I can't emphasize enough, I'm a social psychologist, there has to be an urgency to what we do, but you also have to believe that it's possible. And I would take those two things home, that there's an urgency to do this because it is a moral and ethical imperative, and that it's possible, and it's not only possible, that it's doable.
Great. Thomas.
Yeah, I would just say very quickly that I want to go back to what Rob said about BFA being created to be a catalyst tool. At Lumina, our great hope for BFA is that we will be able to use it to change the game, and that we will change the game by changing the rules. And the rules that we hope to change are the rules of engagement. The rules of engagement between the different divisions and departments and colleagues on college campuses, and the way that they talk and function and interact and work together to help to resolve issues like this. But the other part is to help colleges understand that there's an opportunity to change potentially the rules of engagement with students. The issues of income and personal issues like these have been traditionally left best in sort of a particular corner of an institution. We're hoping that we can free up an institutional approach to a campus-wide conversation with students themselves to say that there are resources, there are accommodations, there are policies and practices that have you at the center, and we want to make sure that you take advantage of them. Hopefully, this will be one of the great results that comes from this wonderful project. We couldn't be more excited about it, and we couldn't be more grateful to you for giving us the chance to talk about it today. So thank you.
Oh, my pleasure, and it's been great having you all on to share your thoughts, your experience, your expertise, and this great resource with the folks who are watching today. So thank you very much. To you all and to our program sponsors, I'm just going to give a few program notes for next week. Tony Duty, my co-host, is going to be back on Student Affairs Live, hosting a show discussing trends in housing with Julie Payne-Kirchmeyer, TJ Logan, and Paul Wunenberg. Which should be a great episode. And then I'll be back in October with a show to kick off Careers in Student Affairs Month with several phenomenal guests. So you can receive reminders about these and all of the shows on Student Affairs Live by subscribing to the Higher Ed Live newsletter. You can browse our archives at higheradlive.com or subscribe to the iTunes podcast to listen to any of our past episodes. Again, my name is Heather Shea Gasser. Thank you so much to everybody who watched today and engaged on the back channel on Twitter. Thanks to Val for monitoring the back channel, and again, thanks to my panelists. Take care, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you.